It's Tuesday, March 7th, 2023. We're waiting on another snowmageddon after we just had one. We had a kill storm like a week ago. We've survived that. We're waiting on the next one this Friday. So in between, that means it's time for the Knee Jerks, Detroit Sports Talk of Eno and Big Al. I'm the Big Al, the Equation, Al Beaton, longtime Detroit-based podcaster and blogger. Joining me, as always, is the man who knows a lot of things about a lot of things. Personal friend of Ron Blomberg, apparently. We'll talk about that in a second. And my co-host, my cohort, and the writer of the Out of Bounds blog, that'd be Greg. What's up, Greg?
Doing well, Al. Thank you so much.
It's kind of an inside joke, something we've been talking about.
Yeah,
so I had to edit it.
We'll get into that later, maybe. I am Greg Eno from my WordPress Out of Bounds blog. Thanks for reading me. If you do there, I appreciate that. Follow me on Twitter at Greg Eno. Follow the Knee Jerks on Twitter at the Knee Jerks. No guest tonight. Al and I are going to fly solo. The joke.
I hear the off buttons being clicked all of a sudden. So.
The joke that Al made was we're working on getting the first designated hitter ever in the history of Major League Baseball. Ron, I think it's actually pronounced Blomberg. Blomberg. Yeah. Trying to get him on the program, although Ron is being inundated with interview requests as it is the 50th anniversary of the DH. And he's trying to entertain them all. And we're just these little fish out here in Detroit, so we'll see if we get Ron at all or not. But regardless, that's okay.
Yeah. I just thought it was a great idea. If it happens, it happens.
Thanks to the Yankees who gave me Ron's contact information right away. Didn't even hesitate, so I appreciate that. So we'll see what happens there. So again, just Al and I, we got lots on the docket, mainly a lot of Red Wings stuff. We got a little bit of Lions. We got, a little bit of Pistons, I think.
No,
we got
baseball. Major League Baseball. Yeah.
A lot with the pitch clock and so forth. Lots of stuff going on there. But before we get to any of that, let's play a game we like to call Whose Birthday Is It, Maestro? Everybody knows how we play this game by now. We give Al a clue or two or three of an individual whose birthday it is today in the world of sports. And if Al can correctly guess that person within the first two clues, he'll receive his own do-it-yourself, build your own crypto kit featuring blockchain management. So we'll see if you can take care of that.
Can you put that in English?
You can make your own Dogecoin.
There you go.
Call it Alcoin.
Yes, there you go. Yes.
Remember the company Alcoa? Alcoa can't wait.
Yes, Alcoa Aluminum, if I remember right.
Yeah, right.
Oh.
Okay, this person, Al, made his name in the world of baseball. He was born on this date in 1950. Excuse me. Sadly, he passed away in 2021. But he was a very, very good. I'll tell you, he's a pitcher. I will give you that. He was a pitcher in the National League. Very, very good. Fireballer, if you will. All-Star 1980. Led the National League in strikeouts twice, but unfortunately, his career was cut short due to a medical situation.
Was it J.R. Richard?
Oh, J.R. Richard, yeah.
Yep.
J.R. Richard, yeah. James Rodney Richard. I didn't realize he only died in 2021. I didn't realize he lived that long, but yeah, he was was on the disabled list, coming back from a circulatory problem in his shoulder, and he was playing catch before a game in the Astrodome. And in 1980, and he just collapsed.
Yeah.
And turned out he had a blood clot in his neck. It was a stroke, essentially.
Yeah.
And he never played again. And
it was a tragic story, and it really derailed his entire life, if I remember right.
Yeah, and it was really that made at the time that made the second tragic end for an Astros pitcher in about 6 years, because don't forget Don Wilson, the great Don Wilson, killed himself, or I don't know if he deliberately killed himself. They still don't know if he deliberately killed himself or if it was an accidental carbon monoxide death in his garage. But that was just, I think, 6 years before JR had his situation. So J.R. Richard, born in the state in 1950. This was a big birthday day today. I could have chosen Joe Carter, Lynn Swann. Franco Harris. Lynn Swann and Franco Harris teammates were born on the same day.
I had no idea.
There are a lot of people that could have. I said, I'm going to go JR Richard. I'm going to go JR.
So and deservedly so, a man who should be remembered because he was, a top number one type stock, a dominant number one pitcher until he had his health issues that completely, really derailed his life. I remember he struggled for several years after that, trying to get his life back on track. I believe he did get things straightened out later in life. But yeah, it was a devastating thing to happen to him. So good call on bringing back his memory, because he was one hell of a pitcher.
Yeah, he was.
All right. So anything else we need to cover before we start hitting our topics tonight? I'm trying to think of anything else.
I don't think so.
I don't think so either. I'm just, so it's I think it's time to start talking a little Detroit Red Wings, because honestly, when I was putting the show notes together this week, the news over the past couple of weeks has been, at least the local Detroit news has been dominated by what were the Red Wings going to do with their, pending unrestricted free agents. The trade deadline's almost here. Are they going to be buyers or sellers? They got super hot. And all of a sudden, for about 24 hours, they actually held one of the wild card playoff spots. And then the wheels started to come off. They've lost 6 straight games since that winning streak. And in midst of that losing streak, Steve Yzerman essentially sold off what he could, got at least one offer that was too good to refuse. We'll talk about that. And he also decided who's going to be the future of this team and who's not. So I guess first off, Greg, we'll kind of start with the were they or weren't they a playoff contender? Because they were playing some very fun hockey. Billy Husso was standing on his head. They were scoring a lot of goals. And they actually got to the point where for a day or so, they slid into the final wild card spot. They actually were in the playoff. They would have been in if the old thing, as the old bromide is, if the playoffs started today on that specific day, the Wings would have been in the playoffs. But right after that, they started losing games. If you live by your goalie needing to stand on his head, when he stops standing on his head, well, the wheels come off. Or in this case, the skates get dull, or whatever term you want to use. But it was interesting, though, Greg, that during all this, especially after the fact, when the contract signings were shook out and who got dealt were shook out, we'll talk about those. Yzerman had a plan from the start. He said he wasn't going to change that plan regardless of their being on the playoff bubble or not. Essentially, Yzerman saying he didn't buy into this team being a true playoff contender, and that wasn't so. He wasn't going to suddenly let a month-long hot streak. It wasn't even that, about 3 weeks or so, change what his long-term plan for the team was. As he put it, if anything, it probably gave us food for thought and delayed some things to see where we were. Ultimately, we stuck to the plan that we had in place. That is to keep our young players and look at opportunities, make a trade with whatever team was trying to do, and see if there was a fit. I think that's kind of talking about Filip Hronek, for example. Ultimately, we needed to decide on our impending undrafted free agents, the guys we couldn't sign. And essentially, those were the guys that, as he put, we needed to move them for future assets. That's kind of paraphrasing this whole thing. So, and those guys they moved on from, obviously, one we were pretty sure he was going to, and that was Tyler Bertuzzi. I still want to call him Todd. Tyler Bertuzzi. Filip Hronek was the surprising one, Greg. He's having a great year, a career year for him anyway, but he was dealt. Unsurprisingly, the Jacob Vrana drama is finally over. They essentially gave him away. And they also traded Oscar Sundqvist for, pennies on, for like a low draft pick. So first off, Greg, we'll talk about what Yzerman had to say. So for all the excitement that was that the Wings were generating, it was fun. They had a couple week period there where they had that winning streak going on. They were scoring a lot of goals. They were an exciting team to watch. But it was kind of obvious going after the fact, Yzerman wasn't buying into any of it, apparently. He knew what his team was. And it wasn't a playoff team, he thought.
Well, he knew it.
Yeah.
The thing that I thought was really refreshing was that he said that he knew it.
Yeah.
He basically said, look, could we have made the playoffs? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Did I think we were a Stanley Cup contender? No.
Yeah.
And really, as in typical Yzerman fashion, he laid it out very. It was very easy to understand. He said, "Look, we could have made the playoffs, yes, and then we could have lost some of these players for nothing. Some of these unrestricted free agents. What value would we have gotten from that? In other words, what value would we have gotten from being, broomed out of the playoffs in the first round, which probably what would have happened.
Yeah.
And then now we've got where does that get us essentially?
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard to argue with that logic. One thing I thought was striking when I was watching the press conference after the trade deadline, and this is the first time I've really ever seen him get a little testy. Was he said, this is what I'm doing. Yeah. And he said it like that. This is what I'm doing. He said, I understand the frustration, but this is what I'm doing. Yep. And if it doesn't work out, it's on me. Yeah. There's the only time I ever.
Really that was his exact words. It's on me.
Yeah. And I've never really seen him get like that before.
Well, he's just, I think the first time he's starting to get a little blowback. Yeah. We're starting to see in the media a little bit of, well, when are they going to turn, even if it was Carlos Monarez, I know he posted a column about that, but the fan bases, there's cracks in the faith in the Yzerplan. I guess I'll put it that way.
But again, whether you're okay, if you're not on board if you're not 100% behind Yzerman, that's fine. You don't have to be. It's hard to argue with the way he described. I don't know how you would rebut that argument. Yeah. Because Tyler Bertuzzi, I don't know what kind of value to have gotten a first round.
It got a surprising amount for him. It really was, because especially for a rental.
He got a first round draft pick for Hronek, which I didn't think he could.
Yeah, and that was a guy. I think that was someone gave me an offer I couldn't refuse, so I had to trade him. Yeah,
and you it's funny. You can a lot of times, Al, you can tell who wins. And I know it's a knee jerk reaction, no pun intended, when about winning trades, but you can tell by social media which fan base is happiest. Okay. Yeah. When that Hronek trade went down, for example.
Oh, you're right.
The Vancouver people were like, what?
What the hell?
What is Rutherford doing? And then when the Boston, with the trade with Bertuzzi was made, there was guarded Bruins fans were like, well, of course, Bruins, I don't think
Bruins are going all in this year, so it makes sense for them.
But they're just were like, oh, I don't know, but but especially the Vancouver people with the Hronek thing were very disappointed with Jim Rutherford about that trade. And the Vancouver fan base has been really cranky anyway, because they don't like the way Rutherford treated who was the coach? Boudreau?
Yeah, Bruce Boudreau.
Yeah. They don't like the way that he let Rutherford.
They shit all over that guy. He did not deserve it the way he was handled.
And Rutherford usually isn't like that. I was surprised that he would do that. But so they were already kind of cranky. And then when this Hronek thing went down, so you can tell just by that, like which fan base is happier. And the Red Wings fans were like, "Hey, we'll take a number one for Hronek, absolutely."
And it gives them a crap ton of draft picks over the next two drafts, high draft picks over the next two drafts. But it also says volumes that Bertuzzi, for example, top line center in Detroit, at most he'll be second line guy in Boston, which I think that kind of tells you a lot about the talent level here in Detroit. And I think Yzerman knew it. A lot of these guys that he traded who were playing top line or top 4, top 6 minutes are not going to be that on a Stanley Cup contending team. I mean, you could actually make that argument about Dylan Larkin on a true cup contender. He's probably your second line center. But here in Detroit, there's the intangibles. We'll talk about Larkin a little bit anyway. Yeah. But it's but the Hronek deal, for example, that you brought up, that everybody was shocked. Yzerman sent Hronek in a 4th round pick, and Hronek, I think is 27, 28, having a career year as a defenseman, and he got a top 12 protected 1st round pick in 2023, completely unprotected 2024, and a 2nd round pick this coming draft. A 1st and a 2nd for Hronek? I don't know how Yzerman did it. I can see why Vancouver fans were so flummoxed, because that trade makes absolutely no sense for them. I mean, Hronek's a good player. I don't see him as a major difference maker. That would to give up that kind of draft capital for him. Especially, there's no guarantee Vancouver's even going to make the playoffs. They were a bubble team. I can see why. Hronek, good player, he ain't worth that, and I can see why Yzerman essentially said, they gave me an offer I couldn't refuse, and for Hronek, and he's going to be a free agent after next year anyway, and he's going to want to get paid. He probably won't be worth what he's going to get paid, much like Bertuzzi, which we'll get into. But yeah, the Hronek deal, came out of nowhere. And then when you saw the haul, it's like, well, that makes a hell of a lot of sense for the Wings, even if it does hurt them this year. But the Bertuzzi deal, that was a top 10 protected first-round pick next year and a fourth-round pick in 2025. Also, the Wings also had to retain 50% of Bertuzzi's salary, which isn't a big deal because he's going to be a free agent anyway. But again, getting a first-round pick, period, for a rental, a guy that Boston may not even be able to keep because they have salary cap issues. I mean, they really pushed in the chips on this year. That deal, again, I know this was a deal I know some Wings fans didn't like because Bertuzzi fits the mold of the gritty, hard-hitting, scoring winger this area loves, even if he is a complete knucklehead. But he was a fan favorite because of his toughness and his willingness to mix it up and essentially being a dollar store version of, say, Brendan Shanahan. I shouldn't be even comparing the two, but that's the style of game he at least tried to play, even though he's not nearly the same kind of player. But the Wings obviously miss that kind of play. But knowing that they weren't going to re-sign him, he's already 28 years old. He's going to want to get paid. He's essentially, obviously, there's the anti-vax stuff that caused him to miss a lot of games during COVID. There is the fact that he's been hurt after COVID. He's been hurt for about half of the last 2 years. He's probably played maybe half their games over the last couple of years, and so he's always had an injury history as it is. I'm even taking the vax stuff out of there, and the fact that he's probably going to get a contract that overvalues what he really would bring to a contending team. Yeah, I can see I think we were both agreement that Bertuzzi, if there was one guy that was going to get traded, it was going to be Bertuzzi. It's just that, man, they got a lot for him, surprising amount for him. And obviously the Sundqvist, whatever, like a third, fourth line center for a fourth round draft pick, for a guy in his late 20s, so be it. But, and also the Varnas. No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Let's talk a little bit about Dylan Larkin's reaction too, though, because and this is the basis of my column that I wrote yesterday. And basically, what I was saying was that Larkin was exhibiting the same kind of emotions that Yzerman himself would display when he was having to explain yet another playoff meltdown. And he was, I'm not sure if you saw it, Larkin was talking about his contract situation. He had just signed that extension, 8-year extension, and he was talking about that. And then the subject of the Bertuzzi trade, which had just gone down, came up, and he lost it. He lost control of himself. He had a stop. Tears came and so forth. But it wasn't so much that reaction that I thought was interesting. It was later when he composed himself. He said, "Look, I understand we traded draft picks that are going to help us for the future. We hope, but." We've got 22 or 23 guys in that dressing room right now. Who are, he didn't use the word betrayed or anything like that, but he said, we got 22, 23 guys in the dressing room. We don't want to just throw our sticks on the ice. We want to play meaningful games, and they played their hearts out this year. It was kind of a veiled, we feel like you've pulled the rug out from under us. But my, of course, retort to that would be, you had quote unquote meaningful games against Ottawa a couple of days prior to that.
Oh, yes.
And we're completely outclassed in both of them.
What was it like? I think the goal totals was like 11-3 or something ridiculous like that. Yeah.
And so those were meaningful games, and I didn't see the rubbing show up for those. So he'll get over it. I mean, I know that it was his good friend and so forth, but Coach Lalonde was quoted today. He said, "I told the guys, look, got to stop feeling sorry for ourselves. We got to get back to playing hockey. There's still an outside chance we can make a playoff run, but regardless, we got to flush that out. And that's part of the game, and blah blah blah. And Lalonde doesn't. This is kind of new for him too. He's not used to being around a team that is fringy like this. He comes from Tampa, where the goal is to win the Stanley Cup every single year, and they damn near do it too. And so, his thing is, look, he says, it's my job to get them to stop this pity party. Enough of the pity party. This is not doing us any good here. And Larkin's got to take bear some responsibility for that as well. But I just think that it comes to I think Larkin is on board with this, or I mean, I'm sure he is.
Yeah.
But I know that I'm sure there are disappointed players that look around them and see all these assets being traded, but let's face it, they're not there yet. They're not good enough to. Lalone says, "Look, we got to play almost perfect every night to win."
Mm-hmm.
There's no margin for error, zero.
Yep.
And we've seen that in the last few games where they've had leads in the third period, and they've had a bad third period. How many times the bad third periods, by the way, have been going on around here for even before Lalone.
Right.
The horrible third periods, and it's still happening. And I still feel like I told you before, I think Husso is playing too much. I think he was never designed. I don't think they got him with the idea that he'd play more than 45 games. Mm-hmm. He's going to probably end up playing between 60 and 70, probably 60 to 65 games. That was not what either party thought was going to happen when they acquired him. They thought he was going to share the net with Nedeljkovic, and that didn't work out. And Husso is just petering out. I mean, he'll have an occasional good game. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
But they still don't have real reliable backups that you can really count on. That's why Husso gets all the playing time, and it's just, I think it's wearing him out. I really do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's it was oh, by the way, I made a mistake. It wasn't an aggregate goal score of 11-3. It was 12-3. They lost the games 6-2 and 6-1 again in back-to-back against the Senators. Essentially, this team wasn't, especially the Senators are a team were essentially considered in the same general rebuild time frame as the Wings, and the Senators just blew the doors off the Wings both those games and kind of drove us all back to reality, to say the very least.
Yep.
So, but that's a good point with Larkin. Yeah, they should be disappointed. But again, they need to look at themselves. They need to look in the mirror as to why those trades ultimately needed to be made. Because when it came for, I was going to say rubber hit the road, when it came to stick on the ice, so to speak, they got their doors blown off. And that says, I'm sure that, as Yzerman said, it gave us pause, and then that happened, and let's get back onto our plan that we're ultimately going to stick to. So. And we also must check on the Jacob Verna drama is finally over. I mean, we've been talking about this last 2 or 3 podcasts, or going back a little bit since he went on the God, what was he went on the essentially I forgot the name of the list he was on. No, essentially,
what is that
player?
List
not player protection. Was it player protection?
I can't.
We essentially, it's where players go when they have mental health issues or addiction issues.
Right.
No one knows exactly what it was, but it was pretty obvious. Even though they finally did call Verona up over in the last couple of weeks, he barely played. There was a lot of talk that, even when he was on the ice, he wasn't a two-way player, and that's always been a thing going back to his days in Washington when they washed their hands of the guy. So, but he was essentially given away. St. Louis finally took a bite and said, "We'll take him off your hands," but it only cost him a 7th round pick, a career minor leaguer who didn't even go to Grand Rapids. It was a paper trade essentially. He stayed at the team he was playing with in the AHL, and the Wings still had to retain 50% of his salary. So they have a cap hit on Verona of I think $5.25 million through next season. But again, that's still cheaper than if they had bought him out and he would have been under cap longer. I think an extra year. So doing this gets him off sooner. But it really is something how no one would say anything, but it was obvious in the way they handled him. They wanted him off that roster as soon as humanly possible without violating the CBA or causing drama or embarrassing the player. But it was obvious the way they handled this guy is that they wanted him nowhere near that locker room. And giving a guy with top 6 talent, who, if you look at his goal scoring numbers, per 60 minutes, he's at the top tier of the league. Yet now this is the second team that has said we've had enough. No, it was obvious the Wings just wanted this guy gone no matter the cost. And the fact that they managed to get a 7th-round pick out of it, well, they figured, well, it's something. But it's still a shame how it ended, but it's obvious it had to end this way.
And that was another thing that it didn't take a lot to read between the lines. Again, part of Yzerman's press conference when he said that they asked him, what about the Vrana thing? He said, and I'm paraphrasing, basically said, there are a lot of things that went on that, I'm not going to get into right now. Let's just say that it was time for both parties to move on. I wish him all the best and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, because there's a lot of rumors going around right now. And a lot of, I don't know if you want to call it, let's say, unverified rumors that, I really wouldn't want to get into. But there's been stuff going around about Vrana for a while. And, what, it's obvious they did not want this guy in their locker room. And, Yzerman handled it the right way. And so did Malone. It's like, best wishes to you. Here's another chance for you. And I don't blame St. Louis because there's always going to be an organization that thinks we could fix this guy.
Right.
And often, how often are they actually able to fix a guy? So.
Well, like I told you, like I think the last time we were together, or maybe the time before that, I said, sooner or later he's going to run out of chances.
Yeah, he's going to end up in Europe or something.
Teams are just going to say, had problems with Washington, had problems in Detroit. Yep. Now, if he's got, I'm not again.
Yeah, we don't know if it's personal demons. We don't know if it's personality we just don't know.
I'm not going to sit here and crap on someone who's got some issues that he may not be able to control. Okay. I'm not gonna demean someone who may have, we don't know, but who may have addiction issues or who may have whatever. I'm not going to punch, as they say in the comedy world, punch down. I'm not going to do that. But the reality is that the reality is that compassion and what you said about the teams that think they can fix this guy, sooner or later that runs dry.
Right.
And what becomes the issue, of course, is when these athletes, Al, and you go back to guys like Charlie Rogers, for example, and these are guys who have all these off the field issues. Okay. And once their bread and butter is taken away from them, which in Rogers' case was football.
Yeah.
Rana's case is hockey. Once that's taken away from them, either because they just get waved out of the league or whatever, that's when you really start to get concerned.
Right.
Then at that point, they're no longer getting, treatment or getting, I should say they're not getting treatment. They're not getting paid attention to.
Yeah.
They don't have an employer. Okay. That's the first thing. They don't have an employer. Okay. Just like anybody else who doesn't have an employer. You and I don't have, if you and I don't have an employer and we have issues that we need to take care of, we may not have the means to seek the help that we need because we don't have an employer who has maybe some benefits that we could take advantage of. Okay. So when somebody's lifelong, not lifelong, what's the word? Their life, not lifeline. What's the word I'm looking for? Life, their vocation, their, you know what I mean? Okay.
Yeah.
Word is failing me right now. Anyway, when that's taken away from them, then you really got to worry about where they're going to go, what path they're going to take. Are we going to end up finding out 6 years from now or less that Vrana is found dead and I know I'm being dramatic here, but found dead in an alley somewhere? It's like Charlie Rogers. Were you surprised? Tell me, were you genuinely surprised when you read about Rogers' demise? No, you couldn't have been. Could not have been. Because once he got away from the Lions, and once he got away from pro football and the shelter that provided him, now he's out on his own with running around with God knows what kind of people, and still with a lot of money.
Yeah,
and so Vrana, I'm not worried about him so much right now because he's got the means to get help right now.
Yeah, but
if he gets waived out of the league or he ends up in the minor league somewhere where there's not maybe that kind of help available to him. We don't know really what's wrong with this guy, but I'm afraid that, because these guys, like Brian Spencer, for example, you remember Brian Spencer, the old forward back in the not Bruins, the Sabres and the Maple Leafs and the Penguins, the Spinner was his nickname. Spencer was one of these hard partying, tough on the ice, and was got a crazy guy off the ice, and it ended up putting him down the path of he got in trouble with the law, and he died. He eventually died. I think I'm pretty sure he passed away. Derek Sanderson. Now, Derek Sanderson was a guy who actually was a success story because his life completely went sideways. Once he left the Bruins, and he made a bunch of money in the WHA, and that didn't pan out. And he became a kind of a journeyman. He turned to all sorts of substance abuse. He became a substance abuse guy. I remember Bobby Orr and Esposito, I think, certainly Orr for sure.
Yeah.
Basically, if it wasn't for Bobby Orr, Derek Sanderson would be dead. There's no question about it. There's no question about it. Bobby Orr paid for his help, got him back on his feet, and Sanderson came back. He became a TV commentator. He got his life back together, became kind of a guy who would talk to other people who were having issues. So he was Sanderson, who's still kicking, by the way. He was a success story in that regard. But how many of those are there versus these cautionary tales of guys who just once that means of income is taken away from not only just their means of income, but their passion is taken away from them, then they really can go sideways.
Yeah, and it's not like Yzerman hasn't played with guys like that in his own time. I mean, he was teammates with Bob Probert. He was teammates with Darren McCarty. Both were well known having exactly. All well known for having off the ice issues. And for all these guys, it would finally come to a point where the teams did want to wash their hands of them, even though with the Wings, McCarty was ultimately welcomed back because he straightened his life out. And, even to this day, it really feels like McCarty's always on the edge of something, if you know what I mean. But he seems to be doing okay now. Obviously, we know how Bob Probert's story ended badly. But, it's not like Yzerman hasn't been around players with these kind of issues before. So, it's a shame it ended up this way, but I think it was best for everybody just that, give Vrana a fresh start and get his. I don't know if they're afraid of his influence younger players. I don't know if he was doing something in the locker room. Who knows? Or maybe he just was having a tough time, period. Or maybe it did have to do with his play. Where, as I said earlier, he's been long known to be a loafer on the ice, a guy who likes to cherry pick, a guy who doesn't play defense. Put it all together, and the Wings finally said, we can't fix them. We're going to move on. And, more power to them. They had that right. And Vrana eventually, will probably continue to play the victim. So, because I believe.
One quick thing about Brian Spencer, I just looked about it. He did indeed pass away. He was only 39.
Yeah.
And here's how he died. He was fatally shot in a robbery following a crack cocaine purchase.
Yeah, enough said. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. So let's move on to contracts. Obviously, we should go through order of importance because the first there is Ole Mata was extended for 2 years, $6 million, a $3 million average annual value. Late 20s defenseman, dependable stay-at-home defenseman. You need guys like him. The more important signings was Jake Wallman, who's having a breakout season, especially after he was paired with Mo Seider. And obviously, they seemed to mesh really well because Seider was not having a good year until Wallman joined him. And it's, all of a sudden, they become this great top pairing for the Wings. Wallman, who was going to be a free agent, he was on a 1-year deal. He signed, I believe, 3 years, 10.2. That's again 3.4 million AAV. And the one we've been talking about, Greg, for the last couple months, the Dylan Larkin drama came to an end. I say contract drama because Larkin's done everything right. He's always said the right things. He's had an all-star season. He's the Wings' leading scorer. He's essentially the face of the franchise at this point. If obviously I think the true face of the franchise is the general manager, but as for players, he's the face of the franchise. Lifelong Michigander, born in Michigan, played at the University of Michigan, drafted by the Wings. Dylan Larkin, 26 years old, came to an agreement on essentially the deal pretty much everybody thought it was going to be right around 8 years, which is the maximum length he could get, and the only team that could give him 8 years were the Wings. If you hit the open market, he would have only got 7. Essentially a market rate deal, $69.6 million over 8 years, $8.7 million average annual value. Essentially the market rate for a center of his skills. It's not an overpayment, but it's definitely not a home team discount either. And I think it was fair for both parties. And essentially, this pretty much ended where everybody thought it was going to end. There was talk that Larkin wanted $9 million, the Wings wanted him closer to $8 million, and he's pretty much met in the middle at 8.7. No, it's not an outrageous deal. If he'll probably remain a productive player for the length of the contract. He's only 26, and this is one of those deals that it would have cost more to replace him than it would be to sign him. I sense that's where it really comes down. To get a player of his similar talent,
sure.
You're going to have to overpay in free agency, or you're going to have to spend a lot of draft capital. So it made sense to sign Dylan Larkin to that deal. And anybody who thinks that's an overpayment, well, they're the type of people who think athletes make too much money, period, anyway. So.
Well, hey, you know what? It's all behind everything. It's behind us now. We can stop talking about the Dylan Larkin contract situation. It was market value.
Yep.
It got done as we said it would.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of funny in a way that it got overshadowed after all this time. Of waiting for it to happen, and it finally happens, and then it's overshadowed by this Bertuzzi trade and about all this drama that happened last week and about the losing streak and everything.
Right.
Hey, it's good that it happened, but I just, what do you think? Do you think that the Red Wings are kind of getting over the hump of this rebuild, or do you think they're still climbing that? Are they still climbing?
I think they're still climbing. I think more because realistically, who on this team would you call an impact hockey player?
Mm-hmm.
Seider, probably.
Good point.
You could maybe, I wouldn't even say Larkin is that, because Larkin, as I said earlier, on a cup contender, he's probably your second line center, or he's like your 1B to your 1A, or you need another player just like him, So, yeah, realistically, I think the only guy you could say who would be who has the talent to win awards, like for Seider, he'd be who could be like him. I could see Seider winning a Norris Trophy. Or, as he ages a little bit. Who else on this team do you see who would be, in the running for any kind of award or even being an all-star? When it comes to an all-star, there's Larkin. That's, he's deservedly an all-star. He's a very good point-to-game center. But other than Seider and Larkin, who is there? They got some pieces who would be, kind of feels like the Pistons in a way, where they have a lot of guys who could play on a contender, but they miss those one or two guys that you built around. They have the pieces to put with those guys. They don't have the guys. And I think that's especially on offense with the Wings. I mean, you can build a defense around Mo Seider. You need that big scoring winger or that otherworldly center to build your offense around, and the Wings just don't have that until they get that, which I think that's why Yzerman is loading up on all this draft capital to either find them in the draft or use that draft capital to trade for one. That's the guy this team really needs. They need someone who can give you 100-point season, essentially, or, and they don't have that, and they haven't had that guy in a very long time since essentially Zetterberg and Datsuk left their prime. Once those guys got old, they haven't had that kind of player since.
There's no question about it. That's a very good. The way you laid that out was very telling. You said, "Look, how many impact players do they have?" And that's a really good way of putting it. And the answer is, of course, very few.
Yeah.
And they're right. You're right. I look around the league and I see the Connor McDavids of the world and Marners of the world and Austin Matthewses of the world and Draisaitl and all these guys, and so I go on, and they all play for different teams.
Yep.
And they and there's really nobody in Detroit that really and frankly, as good as, and it's nice to have a defenseman like Seider, no question about it. But let's face it, this is not a league, and you know it as well as I do. This is not a league that's built around great defensemen. Okay,
your best player should not be a defenseman.
This is not, right. This is not.
No offense to Nick Lidstrom.
No, of course not.
But then again, when you're saying Nick Lidstrom, you're talking about one of the best players of all time. But
Right.
yeah, like you said, in a normal situation, your best player should not be your defenseman. It needs to be a center or a winger. It really does.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there is that player just isn't here yet, and we'll see if they don't. It's very difficult. And Yzerman said this too. He said, "Look, it's those kind of players you almost have to draft because they are so rarely available via trade. So rarely available via trade. And think about it. When was the last? First of all, when was the last time there really was a blockbuster NHL trade anyway?
Yeah.
Whether it was in the middle of the season or in the off season, really, I can't remember the last time there's been a trade that's kind of shook the landscape of the NHL.
Yeah.
It's either been a free agent signing, which even that hasn't really happened a lot lately,
Mm-hmm.
or these kids come into the NHL like the Marners of the world and the Matthews of the world and the McDavids of the world, and almost immediately set the league on fire.
Mm-hmm.
These are generational talents that are available usually only within the top 3 picks of the draft.
Mm-hmm.
And the Red Wings just unfortunately have not been fortunate enough via the lottery and so forth to get that kind of a pick.
Right.
And
exactly.
they've gotten, not that you can't get a good player, of course, at 6 or 7 where they've drafted.
Yeah, that's where they got Seider, for example.
6 or 7, let's face it. Typically a guy who's drafted, let's be honest, a guy who's drafted 6th or 7th overall, which is nothing to sneeze at, of course. If he's fallen to 6 or 7, he's probably not a generational talent, or else he wouldn't have fallen to 6 or 7.
Yeah.
So you have to get lucky. Yzerman himself was a number 3 overall pick. Okay, which is still pretty damn good. Probably should have been higher than that, but I don't know what I think they picked Lawton. One team picked Lawton, and one team picked LaFontaine.
LaFontaine was the big one, yeah. And supposedly that's the guy the Wings wanted was LaFontaine.
Was Yzerman 4th overall? It was Lawton. I think Lawton went number 1 overall.
Yeah.
Or 2. Then it was LaFontaine. Maybe it was one of the Turgeons. I have to look at the draft again.
Yeah.
But Yzerman was no worse than 4th. I know that. He was 3rd or 4th overall. And he ended up being a Hall of Famer. But in this day and age, Al, if a guy falls to 6 or 7, he's not a generational talent. He's just not.
Yeah.
And that's where they've been drafting.
And especially in today's era of upgraded scouting, where guys in Europe aren't hidden anymore. Where the Wings are finding all these diamonds in the lower rounds in the 80s and 90s. That doesn't happen anymore. No, you're not going to find Nick Lidstrom in the 3rd round or whatever, or Pavel Datsyuk in the 7th or 9th, whatever the hell it was. That doesn't happen anymore.
Right.
Yeah. I guess one other thing I should point out is all of a sudden it's looking like Michael Rasmussen getting hurt and being out for the season turned out to be a bigger loss than anybody thought it would be. Because I don't think it's entirely coincidental that the Wings kind of went into this spiral after he got hurt. Where he took a puck. I believe he took a puck to, I forgot if it was upper or lower body anymore. I don't even, you know how the NHL is with injuries. But he's reportedly out for the season. And he was having a career best season as he seemed to have finally found his niche as that 3rd line grinder, get in front of the net kind of guy. A glue guy. He's been a great glue guy. He's really turned into that. And the moment he went down, the Wings went in this little spiral. It might be some coincidence there, but he had become a valuable presence on the lower lines. And when they lost him, it really affected the Wings' play.
Yeah, you're right. That's true. That's very true. That's the other thing that they've not really been lucky when it comes to injuries. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Let's face it. The few really reliable players that they've had have, unfortunately, a lot of them have been felled by some sort of an injury situation. And you're right about Rasmussen. He's one of those guys that you look back and gosh, he's been around that long.
Yeah.
You kind of, because he's not a big goal scorer. He's kind of like a grind line type.
It took him a while to find his niche in the NHL. It really did.
Right.
Especially not helping that he was a high 1st round draft pick. And he's never going to live up to that. But he has made himself a valuable NHL player.
That's true.
But it's just that, I looked at it, he got hit by a puck in the lower leg, and they're not saying what the injury was, but he is out indefinitely. They're saying it's out likely for the season. But yeah, it took him a while to really figure out what his game was in NHL, and he found it. And he's a very good player for them this year. And that again, that falls into everything needs to go perfectly for the Wings to win games. And losing Rasmussen, that changes your lines, it changes your special teams. It's a domino effect, and apparently it was a bad domino effect in the Wings case. So, it's a shame it happened, but he's a solid guy to put in your third or fourth line. You need that, but again, we're talking about guys who are companion pieces, not the piece, and that's the guy that Yzerman needs to find. So,
right.
Oh, what those damn Wings! It was fun while it lasted. I'll just put it that way.
I know, but yeah, it was fun while it lasted. But this is such a crucial time right now because I was talking about the Pistons with a friend of mine last week. We were talking about how for so many years the Pistons were always in that netherworld of not being bad enough to get a really
mediocrity
really
treadmill.
Yes. And not good enough to make any noise in the regular season or the playoffs. And they were always stuck in that middle.
Yep.
For years they did that. And of course they and they'll continue to pay for it. Now with the Red Wings now though, this is what's a little bit scary.
Mm-hmm.
Is they don't have, to your point a few minutes ago, they don't have a lot of impact players. Okay, that's true. Yeah. And where they're at right now, which is bubble playoffs.
They're in that middle you're talking about. Yeah.
And now it's like, oh boy.
Yeah.
How does
they're good enough to maybe make the playoffs and not bad enough to be a lottery team.
Yeah, and so that's a little bit scary.
Yeah.
Because it's not like they've got a core of players that they're just trying to add a couple of pieces to.
Yeah. They've been still trying to figure out who that core is.
Right.
Yeah.
So how do you? So what's going to have to come down to is getting lucky in the draft, of course. And you mentioned back in the day where they used to find these gems in the lower rounds. Yeah. You're going to have to continue to try to do something like that because you're not bad enough, frankly, to get to even in the mix for the top pick.
Right.
And I mean, unlikely that you will be. And so now Yzerman's got to continue this rebuild with his team in the middle. That's why it's so hard. I think I think you and I have talked about this before. It's you to be right way in the bottom and get to a next level is one thing. When you're in the middle now and you're trying to get to the top into the upper, that's the tough part, is getting from the middle to the elite. And that's where it's so hard to do that because you're not getting high draft picks usually. And the Red Wings don't have anybody they can really package in any trade that will yield a game changer.
Yeah.
So where do they go? Well, the draft, obviously, but even the draft, we're not talking like they're going to get a top 3 pick.
Yeah, they're going to be probably drafting low teens, probably. 11, 10, 11, something like that. Yeah, it's they're finding themselves in that same situation. Another kind of reference to the Pistons, but the previous generation of Pistons. And I said they're still not sure who the core is. Right now, the core is Larkin, Sider, probably Raymond. Lucas Raymond.
Yeah.
Wallman, probably, even though he's on the older side. After that, it's and again, as good as some of those guys are, none of them are proven to be the guy, as you say, a Matthews or a McGregor or something like that.
It just seems like that the really and it just seems like that to whip out the checkbook like you used to be able to do every summer. As soon as July 1st hit, people talk about, the trade deadline it's true. The trade deadline in Detroit used to be really exciting.
Oh, yeah.
Because you knew they were going to pick up somebody, usually an aging star.
Yeah, Larry Murphy or Chris Chelios or something.
Right.
That was great.
Robert Lang, guys like that.
All right.
And you knew they were going to bring someone in. I mean, they would never not make a move. They bring somebody in. It was to me, it was always very fun.
Yeah, it was.
Who they were going to get. Okay.
Yeah.
But the other fun part of being a Red Wings fan was July 1.
Yeah.
July 1, circle it on your calendar. That was the first day of free agency in the NHL.
Yep.
That was always when the Red Wings would bring in a big name, a big name, July 1st every year. And sometimes it really worked out. Sometimes it didn't so much, but they always had a press conference in early July with some big superstar type guy. It's hard now to even do that. To even just say, just whip out the checkbook on July 1st.
The hard cap. I'm not a fan of the hard cap. Never have. I'm not a fan of salary caps, period.
Right.
But if you're going to have a salary cap, then you have the NBA, probably the best example of it, where it's a soft cap. There are workarounds and there are ways to keep players. The NHL, you reach a certain point, you have to blow the team up because you can't afford to keep guys. And the hard cap, as much as the owners love a hard cap is horrible for fans and horrible for players. And it leaves you in situations like that where you can't have an exciting free agent free-for-all because very few teams have enough cap space to do it. And it limits competition, it limits movement, and it limits the amount of money a player can make. Now, I hate salary caps. Yeah, and I think fans who love, and fans who think all sports should have a salary cap are the types who would say, well, how come teachers don't make $5 million a year? Those are the kind of dimwits who love salary caps.
Well, the one thing we did not talk about was the trade that almost happened that didn't. Was the
I forgot about
Van Riemsdyk trade with the Flyers, which fell through at the last second. I'm not sure if the Red Wings were going to give up on that trade.
Because all of a sudden, the end of the trade, right before the 4 o'clock deadline, the Wings are in on him, and also just fell apart.
Now, I'm looking at the unrestricted free agents, Al, that are available this summer. And as you would expect, it's a mix of older guys who are on the back ends of their careers and guys who maybe wouldn't necessarily turn the city on fire. But, Patrick Kane, who just got traded to the Rangers, he's going to be, he's a UFA. Yeah. As is his former teammate, Jonathan Toews, is a UFA.
Hey, let's bring back Bertuzzi.
Ryan O'Reilly from Toronto is a UFA. Tarasenko and the Rangers is a UFA. Riemsdyk we just talked about. Max Pacioretty with Vegas. Yeah, he's past his prime. Pasternak. All these guys are Milan Lucic. I mean, all these guys. Okposo. They're all old.
They're past their prime. They've had they're end of their career guys for the most part.
Right. So the guys who were in there. This is what we were talking about the other day. The other show about baseball and how you and I were talking about there doesn't seem to be any sort of a middle class anymore. Yeah. And it seems like in hockey now, gone are the days where you could sign a guy in the summertime who's in his prime, 28, 29 years old, 27, 28, 29. And he would be, there you go. Yeah. Now it's bargain basement again. It's just, it's shopping from the discount rack again.
Yeah. Yeah. It's depressing to think about. I miss those days. I really do. Yeah. Where there were certain days, parts of the year where for the Wings or a lot of these teams, it would be super, they say the same with the Tigers back when Mike Ilitch was spending like a drunken sailor. The free agency was exciting. The trade deadline was thrilling.
And now, as much as I appreciate the Matas of the world and the David Perrons of the world and the Cops of the world, that's not going to get it done.
No, and those guys are specifically signed for one reason: to make your locker room professional, essentially.
Right.
These are guys that are legitimate NHL players, and they're going to show you young guys how to prepare to be an NHL player. Right. But they're not difference makers. They're not guys who are going to carry you to a win, that kind of thing.
Right.
So it's like I said all of a sudden, as we've talked about the Wings, I'm with you. I'm kind of concerned as to where they stand. They have some good players, but they don't have some great players. They need an impact player, but it's almost impossible to get an impact player unless you draft him top 3. But they're too good to be. And here we are. Also,
I don't know if they could. I don't know if they could package anything with anyone to get a top. That's another thing you could do. Maybe is trade up in the draft. But again, their trade pieces, I just don't think are very attractive.
Yeah, because even these draft picks they've got, these high draft picks they've picked up, best case scenario, some of these is their high teens, maybe, I think for some of these that they kind of have to hope for, like the Boston one, is that they have to hope for Boston that 6 days protected and then the wheels fall off next year. and then that pick becomes very, very high. But that's a huge gamble. Because as of right now, that Bruins pick is going to be, you're going to get a player, but you're not going to get an impact player. So Yzerman has his work cut out for him. I'll say that much. And I for one, am getting tired of, I have trust in the Yzerplan. Yes, I believe Steve Yzerman is a very good GM, but there's no guarantee what he's doing is going to work in the end. None. And people say, well, look what he did in Tampa Bay. Yeah, but he also had more pieces to start with in Tampa Bay, which we've discussed that in the past. So, and it did take him a while to kind of untangle the mess that Ken Holland left with the, some of these untenable long-term contracts he gave out, and almost every one of them had non-movement clauses in them. And it took him a couple years kind of to get that figured out. And now we're in year 4 of Steve Yzerman, and now that they might be a bubble playoff team next year. And after that, again, that puts them in that same area that we decried the Pistons for being in. And, we'll have to wait and see. I trust Yzerman, but I don't have he doesn't have my complete trust, to put it that way. I trust him to make the right moves, but I'm not one of those saying, in Stevie Y I trust, and he can do no wrong. He has already done some wrong. The Hronek trade, for one, was a big wrong. And that ended up costing him Mantha and a first-round draft pick, if I remember right.
Well, the only thing that's not making that a complete disaster is that Mantha himself is not exactly turning the world on fire.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
He's not. Mantha has not taken a step forward either.
And the other thing of that is, remember, they got Richard Panik in that deal as well. And I think if you do the domino thing and the trades, how I think it was Panik for Leddy and Leddy for Walman.
Forgot about that.
Yeah. So at the very least, there's that. But even still, Yzerman is not infallible, and he has made some missteps. Or you could talk about those free agency signings you talked about. Some have worked out. Some of them have not, and they have not in a very big way. So, like I said, the jury's out. I trust Yzerman, but I'm not going to put my undying faith in the guy. And I just hope that his tenure here doesn't end the way Joe Dumars did. At least Dumars won a title. So we'll see what happens. Yeah. All right. With that, let's talk a little bit Tigers. And not really Tigers per se, Greg. It's more big picture baseball stuff. Mm-hmm. Because MLB rules changes are starting to make their presence felt in spring training. And not so much the larger bases, even though we've seen maybe an uptick in stealing. Now, the Tigers seem to be running a little bit more. There's the PitchCom system that allows pitchers and catchers to call pitches without doing the fingers down stuff, which I kind of miss, but it also speeds the game up, which the game desperately needed. The elimination of the shift, that's something that's probably going to be a year-long thing to see how that affects defenders and also affects left-handed hitters. And the big deal, and the Manfred man runner, whatever. I'm not a guy, Gary. I'm not going to be a purist who's going to lament, there's no 20-inning games anymore. Mm-hmm. I'm old. I don't want to watch 7-hour games. But the strictly enforced pitch clock, which is 15 seconds when the bases are empty, 20 seconds when there's a runner on base, was the most likely rule change to make an immediate impact, and it has. And if you ask me, the results are very positive. And this is, through the first 4 days of 24 games, I should say, of this 2023 spring training for average. This is averaged out, and I believe this is from Bob Nightingale of USA Today. So it's a legitimate source. But the new rules in place and the umpires enforcing them the way they're supposed to, because they aren't even for years, Greg. They were supposed to enforce, a pitch clock, but they just ignored it, which gave us at bats that took 10 minutes and it was ridiculous. But through the first 4 days of 2023 spring training games with the new rules, the average game time was 2 hours and 39 minutes. And that was and with the pitch clock violation, they averaged about 1.5 violations a game. They averaged out essentially once a game. Miguel Cabrera would be busy talking and forget to and he'd have a strike called against them, stuff like that. And obviously there was the one game in spring training where the game-winning run was plated because of a pitch clock violation. But regardless of that, That's a 20-minute difference. The year before, an average game in spring training was 2 hours and 57 minutes, 3 hours essentially. They've managed to cut 20 minutes off a game. And great. Pace of play has been the Major League Baseball's biggest issue, if you ask me, more than gambling or the shift or salaries or whatever. The biggest problem baseball has had for a long time is pace of play. I don't care if a game goes 3 hours, goes 4 hours, if the game is moving along. But there is no reason on earth, Greg, a 9-inning game should take you 3.5, 4 hours. And that became way too commonplace over the past decade or so. Playoff games. A playoff game would start at 8:15, run till past 1 o'clock in the morning, and wouldn't even go into extra innings. So the pitch clock is working, and even if keep the game average under, if they can keep it at 245, between 230 and 245, perfect. Because I think what a lot of baseball fans, Greg, aren't old enough to remember when a 2-hour ball game was essentially expected. That was, Mark Fidrich would pitch a game under 2 hours.
Yep.
He'd get the ball, pitch the ball, get the ball, pitch the ball. Because we were talking before the show, and I missed this when this was announced a couple weeks ago, that the Tigers announced that the majority of their weeknight home games at Comerica Park will now start at 6:40 p.m. instead of, they've been 7:10 probably for the last decade and a half, if not longer. And which means games will end at a more reasonable time. I mean, we figure this, they start at 6:40, a game that lasts 2 hours and 2.5 hours. Great, perfect. You're home by 10, but Greg and I are old enough to remember where the Tigers used to start their night games at 8 p.m. Mm-hmm. And I remember the excuse they used was shift workers, things like that. They always said, the shift workers they're getting off work. Yeah, make sure to get time to get to the game. And even into that was, 50s, 60s, into the 70s. And even then, for a very long time, they started their games at 7:30. And then in the last, 10, 15 years, they moved it to 7:10. And now we're going to 6:40. I think baseball is finally getting some common sense here. Games were, actually, I don't care if a game is long as it moves, and games don't move. And there's no reason for a weeknight home game to end at 11 o'clock at night. So between these two changes, between Major League Baseball making the pitch clock a thing, and the Tigers saying, no, there's no reason for a game to, a game in August to end. Let's get it in before the sun even goes down. I think this is very, very smart moves for Major League Baseball and the Tigers and everything else. This is a good thing for all the people railing against, oh my God, the traditionalists. Screw that. If you want to watch a 4-hour 9-inning game, more power to you, but I don't.
I hope they bring back daytime World Series games. Wouldn't that be great?
Yeah, and for trivia, the last daytime baseball game, World Series game was Tigers and the Padres, if I remember right.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I believe it was the game where Trammell went yard twice, if I remember right.
I remember going to my first Tigers game. It was 1971, and they beat the Yankees. And exactly what you said. The game started at 8 o'clock.
Yep.
I remember, I lived in Livonia at the time. I remember going to the game, which started at 8 o'clock.
Yep.
Sat through the entire game. Tigers won 3-1. We drive home. And I'm home. We're home, and I'm watching highlights of the game that I just saw on the 11 o'clock news.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the game probably took a little over 2 hours. We got in our car, got back to Livonia.
You're home by 10:30.
Yeah, and there we are. Then I'm watching, and I was so excited to watch the highlights because I'd never seen highlights of a game that I attended before.
Yeah.
And so I was so excited. I was hoping we were going to get home in time for the 11 o'clock sports, which usually came on around 11:18, 11:19. Yeah. And sure enough,
you see Al Ackerman or Ray Lane or
yes.
Yeah.
And there they were, the highlights, and no way could you get away with that now. I'm with you on everything. I'm with you on the earlier start time. Yep. I'm with you on the pitch. Now, the one thing with the pitch clock, people forget that the pitch clock isn't just for the pitcher.
Yeah, it's for the batter, exactly.
The pitch, right? Yeah. The pitch. You mentioned that incident that happened in that spring training game. I think it was Boston and Atlanta. I think, and a kid from Atlanta. Yeah. Got called out. It was bases loaded, 2 outs, bottom of the ninth or whatever it was, and 3-2 count, the whole 9 yards. You couldn't make a better scenario. And he takes too long to get in the box, and the umpire calls strike 3 essentially. Now, so it's not just the pitchers who have to pick up the pace. And frankly, I don't think the problem has ever really lied with the pitchers. I mean, I know that there's been some pitchers do work slow. There's no question about it.
Oh, yeah.
Banana, when guys got on base, slow his pace slowed to a halt. Almost to a halt if there were men on base. But it's the batters, to me, is who's the bigger offenders are the batters, not the pitchers.
Yes. Human rain delays, as they would call it.
Well, yeah.
Was it Mike Hargrove? The human rain delay? The human rain delay.
I wrote a column about him last week. The thing is that it seems like to me, I'm watching the pitchers waiting on the hitters more than I'm seeing the hitters waiting on the pitchers.
Yeah.
So this pitch clock, it's called a pitch clock, and people seem to think it's targeting just the pitchers.
Right.
But it's meant for both parties, pitcher and hitter, to be ready to go. Like you said, 15 seconds no men on base, 20 seconds men on base. Now, apparently, the question, which is a good question, somebody said, well, when is the 20 seconds up? Well, apparently the pitcher has to start his motion before that. In other words, the pitch doesn't have to be delivered technically within the 20 seconds. If he's starting his motion within that time frame, it's okay. Yeah. But the batter must be in that box, or else he's going to get a strike called against him, no matter what the count is.
Yeah. You could argue one of the worst things that ever happened to baseball was Mike Hargrove, who
but Hargrove played at a time, Al, where nobody cared.
Yeah, but he was one of the first guys who would step out after every pitch.
Nobody cared.
But at the time, it became commonplace.
Yeah,
which is the issue.
Yeah,
that well, look at him. He's and all of a sudden more batters started doing I got to check my batting gloves. I got to redo my helmet. I got to tuck my shirt back in. I got to kick the dirt off my spikes. And the next thing you know, 60 seconds has gone by. It's not. I'm not going to completely blame Mike Hargrove, but he was the he was the symptom of baseball's illness, that they were trending in the wrong way when it came to the pace of play, and it got exacerbated with Tony La Russa's bullpens, the way he handled bullpens and constant pitching changes. Which I know it's changed strategy somewhat, but I have no problem with the elimination of the loogie, for example. Here's another benefit. These one batter kind of guys, I don't miss them.
Yeah, I know. I know.
Yeah, I'm ashamed that guys lost jobs because of it. But if you're a good enough pitcher, you should be able to pitch to more than one batter.
Who was that guy that the 2006 Tigers had? Jamie something, left-hander, who's a loogie. Jamie. Oh God, he pitched like 80 games and pitched like 50 innings or something like that. Because he faced like one batter every hour. I can't remember. It was a lefty. They're always lefties. Well, Loogie, obviously. Jamie, I'll think of it. Anyway, the other benefit to this thing,
Jamie Walker,
less time for the announcers to talk about the damn game. I love that aspect to it. Don't underestimate the value of that.
Yeah.
Now there'll be less time for the announcers to gab between pitches. Thank goodness.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, you're thinking of Jamie Walker. Yes, like in 2007, he had 81 appearances. He only threw 61 innings, for example.
Right.
In 2006, it was 56 appearances and 48 innings.
Yep.
At his worst, 2008 with Baltimore, 59 appearances and 38 innings.
Oh my God.
Yeah. He was a true loogie. That's the kind of player that doesn't have a job anymore. But it's a small price to pay for the pace of the game being sped up. Like I said, I don't have a problem with a 3-4 hour game if the pace is if it's moving quickly. And and maybe we'll see some odd shit this year, but people getting used to it, or I know there's pitchers experimenting with quick pitching, for example, and there's also, they're limited as the amount of throws they can make to first base now as well. And guys like Max Scherzer are trying to game it to where, trying to start making people guess, what am I going to use those throws over there? Stuff like that. There's going to be some added strategy to some of this stuff, which is actually a good thing, for, people who love the double switch as the pinnacle of strategy. Well, now there's some more strategy in the game because you got to use pitchers differently, and how the game is being played is a little bit different, and that'll change how things are gone. So I am all for this. Baseball had to do something, right? Because it was getting out of control. It really was. There's no, like I said, I've said it again and again and again. There's no reason a 9-inning game should take more than 3 hours. Right. And here we are where that's if a game ended after 3 hours, normally I'm like, wow, that game went quick. Considering back in the day, a 3-hour game, when we were kids, a 3-hour game would have went 15 innings or something. So, but yeah, this is a good thing, and people who are bitching about it got to get used to it, and they'll get used to it. They will. There's nothing wrong with, people going to a ball game and actually, being able to walk out of the damn ballpark before the sun's down completely, so. And, if they still want to have late games, they'll still do them on the weekends. Games will start later. I just like the changes Major League Baseball is doing. It's long overdue. So I know Greg agrees. All right.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
We need to touch a little bit more on the RSNs, the regional sports networks, right? Because that's a revenue thing for teams like the Tigers. But there's now more, and when we last spoke about this, Diamond Sports Group, owned by Sinclair, aka Bally Sports, is expected to file for bankruptcy. They have missed the $140 million interest payment. And if Diamond, aka Bally, is unable to pay teams, which has become a very likely possibility, their broadcast agreements, which includes the Tigers, Red Wings, and Pistons, will likely become terminated by the leagues. But now there's another player in town in trouble. AT&T Sportsnet, which is owned by the recently merged and very financially troubled Warner Brothers Discovery. Look up at the drama around HBO Max right now to tell you what's going on in Warner Brothers Discovery. It's a mess. Well, they announced they could be facing bankruptcy, the AT&T Sportsnet RSNs, and Warner has said, we want out of the RSN business. We don't want to be in this anymore. So, and it's a business they inherited. So Rob Manfred has admitted if the RSNs go under, Greg, teams would not be able to 100% replace that revenue, which that's probably a given. But if they go under, the league has said they are putting plans in place to produce games through the MLB network and obviously MLB.TV. Then they would just sell the stuff themselves, the Comcast. They would go to to do all the carriage stuff themselves. But the one potential benefit would be is that maybe they would finally come to their senses and allow the loosening of blackout restrictions on MLB.TV, because obviously those games are blacked out. If I want to watch the Tigers, I have to jump through a couple. That's what I do. I don't pay for Bally at all. I do though. I do have MLB.TV, and I use a VPN. I fake where I'm at, and I'm able to watch the Tigers. But I'm paying for MLB.TV. But the blackouts thing, Greg, has been stupid for years. Because you have some markets that can't watch like 5 or 6 teams because they're in, especially in the Midwest, where you have Colorado and St. Louis and Minnesota, and Texas. A few of these teams all wanting the same markets, and people start getting blacked out from multiple teams. It's absolutely ridiculous. Right. So, one, I would put it this way: Sinclair losing their shirts, that's a good thing because they're an awful company. Warner Brothers Discovery losing their shirts, that's also a good thing because they're an awful company. And in the end, Greg, I really think this might be one of the few times where the consumer will actually end up becoming winners because they will have a better option when it comes to watching baseball or other sports for that matter by just going through the leagues. And if the leagues are smart enough to finally say the blackout thing is dumb, we'll just handle all this ourselves. They may lose a little bit of revenue at the start because they won't get these ridiculous. Some of these fees some of these amounts teams were getting from like Bally and the like were ridiculous. But in the long run, I think they will keep more viewers. They will not lose as many viewers by just going through their own process of producing games and taking the middleman that is Bally or AT&T Sportsnet out of the equation altogether and screw the blackouts. If they get rid of blackouts, they would get cheers from fan bases across the country.
Well, of course.
Mm-hmm.
I was reading that portion of the show notes where you were talking about the blackout thing, which I didn't realize until you pointed that out.
Yeah.
And that would, well, the fact that we shouldn't even be talking about blackouts at all anyway in this day and age. And my goodness gracious.
Yeah.
But it's going to be interesting to see how this whole thing plays out.
Yeah.
Because the good news is, though, to your point, nobody has to worry. For anybody who is worried, don't worry about not being able to see the games at all. Don't. That's the first thing you don't have to worry about.
Right.
These companies potentially going under does not mean, you mentioned
there won't be. Yeah, baseball will be on TV. Baseball, MLB will be sure of that. Yes,
absolutely. That's for sure. So you don't have to worry about that. And it could, in a weird way, change the landscape of baseball sports broadcast. Forget baseball. Sports broadcasting in general. We'll see. You're right that sometimes these companies' malfeasance may end up being, like you said, a boon for the consumer. We'll see. But
I'll just say MLB.TV is a great service. It works really well. You have the options of watching the home team TV feed, the road team TV feed, and also the radio of those feeds as well. And you can watch, and obviously, like in my case, I can watch every team but the Tigers right now, which sucks. Well, honestly, I do because I know how to bypass the restriction, but it's a great service. And if they would just lift the blackouts and allow people just to say, I want to watch my local team, I will give you the money directly. That's all that fans have been asking for years. That way, because people know if there's one thing that people hate more than Rob Manfred, there are cable companies. And if they have the opportunity to say, a lot of people have cable. Still have cable because that's the only way, or it's the easiest way for them to watch sports. Like I do pay for YouTube TV myself. And even though I do have NBA League Pass, I have ESPN Plus, so I can watch the NBA and NHL, obviously MLB.TV as well. But the main reason I still use YouTube TV, and it costs me like $55 a month, which is still hella cheaper than Spectrum would cost me, is that I still want to watch college football. I want to watch NFL, and those things are you still need be able to watch ESPN. You need to be able to watch Fox and Fox Sports 1 and NBC, CBS, ABC, whatever, if you want to watch this stuff. And the easiest way to do it is to have something like, is to have a over-the-top provider who will do this. But the thing is, most of these providers anymore, except for Spectrum and Charter, will not do business with Bally because they ask for too much money. So I'm sure a lot of people, if people had the opportunity to say, if I can just give the leagues my money instead of giving my money to Charter or giving it to Comcast, they'd cut the cord in a heartbeat. This would be a great thing for Major League Baseball if they could get away with it. And I hope they do, because like I said, cable companies are evil. They're monopolies for the most part in the markets they're in. And it's, in the end, it's not a very good service. Trust me, I'm a freaking socialist at this point in my life, it feels like. And I've always said internet needs to be a public utility. It really should. You cannot live in today's world without high-speed internet. And the problem is companies like Charter and Spectrum, they changed their name because everybody hates Charter, and Comcast, or whatever the hell they call themselves now. You still have to go through them to get your internet, and there's no competition. Even though that is starting to change with companies like Verizon and T-Mobile going to 5G home internet. It's becoming more and more available. So there is finally starting to be some competition out there. But if there's an opportunity for Major League Baseball and NBA And in the NHL, to just cut out the middleman. They really, really should. And that would allow them to, I'm sure they would take a revenue cut in the, early on, but I still think in the long run between the possibility, it opens up so many other possibilities as to what they can do, and in consumer goodwill, it would be best. I think it would be best in the long run.
It's hard to argue with anything that you're saying because it all makes perfect sense.
Yeah. So that's why it won't happen.
Well, you never know. I mean, but this, baseball is this is just a kind of an interesting time for the game. I mean, we were just talking about the rule changes a little while ago. We didn't talk about the larger bases. We didn't talk about the shift that much. But
I think, like you said, we'll have to give like a full season to see how those play out.
Right. But, so and then now we're in this thing with the TV thing too. So and the fact that I wonder how many kids are playing baseball anymore and so forth.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't see them playing around where I live too much, unfortunately.
I know. When I hate saying this because I feel like Abe Simpson yelling at a cloud. But when I was 10 years old, I would play baseball morning through night. When I got up in the morning, went outside till I went in for dinner. We played baseball all goddamn day, and then we also played Little League, So, and we also played other sports. Don't get me going on when you have 11-year-old kids having to pick one sport, and that's the one they have to play for the rest of their teen years, which I find is bullshit.
Yeah, when you were a kid, when you played Little League, when you played Little League, that's what you played baseball for a living, and then in your spare time you played baseball.
yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it was. But the thing is, then in the fall, you know what I wasn't doing in the fall? I wasn't playing baseball. I was playing football or basketball. Right. And then I took up baseball again in the spring. And you developed other skills that I think, and also I know we're getting off on a tangent here, but I think it affects kids' bodies and players' bodies to where all of a sudden you have 20-year-old guys whose arms are worn out because they've been throwing curveballs since they've been 9 years old.
Can you imagine if you grew up you grew up in Michigan, right?
Yep.
Okay. Can you imagine how much baseball you would have played if you grew up in California?
Florida? I know. California, Florida.
Texas?
Hell yeah. Yeah.
Arizona? Yeah.
Yeah.
Playing it all the time.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I miss those days. I had a lot of fun playing sandlot baseball. It was hella fun. And also, I have to say, I feel like an old man when I talk like this, but, we were our own umpires. We made our own teams.
Yeah.
We had to do our own. Yeah. We had to be our own problem solvers. We didn't have any adult supervision when we played our sandlot games, or we played on what we called the battlefield. That's what we called it. And it was just a big open field by our elementary school that we played on. And it had a backstop. So it was but again, we would get together. And oftentimes, even while we were still in school, we would be making plans in school to meet after school and play baseball, or whatever sport we were into at the time, be it basketball or football, whatever. So,
right.
Yeah, now you really got me feeling like Abe Simpson. I'm ready to say, you'll put me in the cold ground before I honor Missouri, that kind of thing. So, anyway, let's wrap this up with NFL QB contracts. This is kind of tangentially involving the Lions because of the draft and where they stand with Jared Goff. Because, the New York Giants just think Danny Dimes, Daniel Jones, their starting quarterback, to a 4-year, $160 million contract. Danny Dimes making $40 million a year. Derek Carr, who was essentially the West Coast version of Matt Stafford, finally, was able to finagle his release from Las Vegas, pardon me. And he signed with the States for 4 years, $150 million today. Geno Smith, a career journeyman who had a breakout year taking over for Russell Wilson in Seattle, just signed 3 years, $105 million. The Ravens today put a non-exclusive franchise tag, Greg, on Lamar Jackson. And the franchise tag on non-exclusive is a low $32.4 million. That's essentially Jared Goff money. But Lamar Jackson in free agency was reportedly looking for more than Deshaun Watson's 5-year, $230 million. I don't think we'll get it, but that's what he wants. But he will get more than $32 million a year. And the Ravens do have the option to match whatever deal Jackson signs, and if he doesn't, if they don't, they get 2 first-round draft picks. It's very convoluted. Right. But still in need of extensions also, Greg, are Jalen Hurts, Joe Burrow, and Justin Herbert. All guys who I think you could probably argue are better than Jared Goff, but not that much, like a guy Herbert, not that much better, at least the Goff we saw last year anyway. Regardless of all that, that's right now the Lions pretty much have a bargain with Jared Goff if he plays at the level he did for the majority of last year. He's beginning to look underpaid at $31 million a year over the next 2 years. That's what he's still owed on his contract. But if he plays as well as he did this season, or even remotely close to it, he'll easily be in that $45 to $50 million range on his next deal. And I still find it laughable that there's Lions fans out there saying, well, maybe he'll sign a team-friendly deal, or maybe he'll sign short-term, or, maybe, maybe he thinks he's made enough money. Oh my God, don't be dumb.
Right.
But that's the question though. I didn't listen to Mike Valenti today, but apparently I heard that he was making the case that seeing what these contracts are, the Lions should just lock Goff up right now and give him his extension today and try to get him as cheaply as they could. Maybe they could get him at 40, 45 instead of 50 or 55. So, which if you told me this 2 years ago, I would have said you're insane, but now it's starting to look like it might make sense. So the other question is, or do you just let it ride and draft a quarterback at 6 or 18? And it's starting to look like if you want a quarterback, they're going to have to draft him at 6. And even then they might not even be there because of the combine and what Anthony Richardson did, which essentially showed he was a freak of nature. Even though he's as accurate as a shotgun, the guy's an absolute freak of nature when it comes to his athleticism. It looks like he might be a top 5 quarterback now. So the Lions kind of, and it all comes down to, do you pay Jared Goff, or do you start planning for the exit of Jared Goff in this draft? Because if things go the way you think they're going to go, the Lions won't be drafting this high again for quite some time.
Yes, agreed. This is one thing I keep replaying this quote over and over in my head ever since I read it about maybe a month ago.
Yeah.
Lions general manager Brad Holmes said, it's a lot easier to get worse at quarterback than it is to get better. And boy, is that's one of the most spot on things I've ever heard anybody say about the NFL. Yeah. And that is so. That
is the NFL in a nutshell, really.
Oh, no question about it. And they were talking the other day about I'm not sure if was it Holmes. I think it was Holmes talking about backup quarterback and why backup quarterbacks are simultaneously very important, but also low priority. It's weird. Backup quarterback is weird.
Yeah.
And he was talking about, how the Lions just don't have anybody right now, with all due respect to Nate Sudfeld.
And I did read today, Nate Sudfeld's a free agent anyway. So
they don't have
a quarterback.
Holmes said, look, part of the blame of that is on me. I have not done a good job addressing that.
And he's gotten very lucky that Goff hasn't gotten hurt seriously.
But back to your original point, I think I'm really, really seriously thinking that the Lions should hitch their train to Goff for the long term. I mean, this guy's 27, 28?
28.
Okay.
28. So he'd be given 5 years, he'd still only be 33 at the end of the contract.
He might get it right.
Yeah.
Okay, right. We don't. It just seems to me that everybody keeps talking about how hard it is to find a quarterback, and that's true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think what gives people pause about Goff is that he plays for the Lions.
Mm-hmm.
And that has not necessarily been a good marriage between quarterback and the franchise. And
Yeah.
as good as Matt Stafford was, nothing really happened here as a result of his being good. There really was no playoff victories. There was nothing that really happened from a team standpoint. So now you've got a scenario where the team, and I by the way, I told you, I don't know when, a little while ago, that you would have to be derelict if you did not pick the Lions to win the division. And sure enough, all the picks are in now.
Yep.
All the preseason, all pre-draft picks are in, and everyone, as I suspected, just about everybody is picking the Lions to win the North. And because you'd be basically a fool not to, essentially. Okay. So you've got a team that looks like could be trending upward. We don't know yet, but looks that way. So why would you do anything? And Goff was just incredible, let's face it, especially the second half of the season. I know that's the second half of the season. I understand that. But this, he's competent. He's not, I don't think he's
well, and it's not like he hasn't played this well before, because he played that well for stretches with the Rams.
Exactly.
And if you ask me, it's starting to look more and more like Goff wasn't the problem. Sean McVay was the problem.
And McVay, hey.
He's starting to look like a very prickly.
Matt Stafford essentially landed in McVay's lap.
Yep.
In a way, and so he rolled with it, and they won the whole thing. Okay, fine, great. But I'm just looking at this whole, trying to look at it from a big picture standpoint. I'm looking for all the draft capital the Lions still have, and all of the players that they have that are, especially in the offense, that are in their, not even in their prime, that are young.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't even really say they're in their prime. You can't say Amon-Ra St. Brown's in his prime.
Right.
These are still kids.
Yeah.
But they're very, very talented. And but you do have some guys who are in their prime, like, well, maybe a little bit past. Jamal Williams is probably right in that middle of his prime, if you will. But the thing is that most of these guys, the offensive line is fairly young.
Yeah.
These wide receivers are young for the most part. So they look like if they can get the defense figured out.
Yeah.
They look like they could be a force to be reckoned with for the next 3 to 5 years. So why would you do anything wacky like bring in a new quarterback? I mean, I don't. The more I think about it, I think we've been maybe kind of can't see the forest for the trees here. I mean, the answer to your quarterback situation is right there. He's on the team. Yeah. Now that does not say, I'm not saying that. By saying that, I'm not saying that, well, you just don't forget the quarterback because we're not even going to draft one. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that I don't think that I think you hit your contract, you put your money into Goff. Yeah. And I mean, I really believe that. And just I just think that I think that he's good enough with the right pieces around him to the Lions essentially played some playoff games, pseudo playoff games at the end of the year last year when they were trying to make the playoffs. Now they had the one stinker in Carolina. Okay, fine. Okay, fine. They had that stinker, yes. But other than that, to me, that win in Green Bay, when they were eliminated just moments before kickoff, and Dan Campbell said, "Look, we even said it on television on the interview live. We do not want the Packers to make the playoffs." Yeah, and they had all the reason in the world to pack that game in. The Lions did, and Goff willed them to victory at the end of the game. And
I think it said volumes that they said we're going to win the game. We're going to let Goff throw a pass on 4th down, and end the game right there.
I think you said. I think it was the first show we recorded after that game. You said, "Is it almost better that the Lions season ended
the way
this way
on a high?" Yeah,
right. Yeah. And I said, it is better. Yeah. And I think that this team, I just don't. It seems like he's got the locker room. I don't know why you would do anything other than just. I know it's a lot of money.
Subtract or add a controversial. Yeah, if you added a guy, the heir apparent now, like you look. I mean, I would give a Goff a lot more credit than Aaron Rodgers. But you could tell when the Packers drafted Jordan Love a couple years ago, that pissed off their starting quarterback and probably caused a bit of undue drama for a essentially an MVP quality guy. So I can see the thing that said, you know what? Let's not rock the locker room, and we'll look for a good backup quarterback, pay the money there, and let's roll with Goff. And if we need to extend them for 3 years or something like that, then let's do that. I could very easily understand that being the move, but I think it all goes out the window if something happens in the draft, and the next thing you know, CJ Stroud's there at 6.
Well, that's which would be shocking, frankly.
Yeah, exactly. The way things are looking, they're talking like 4 quarterbacks could go in the first 5 picks.
Now, Goff. A lot of times we talk about these big contracts, especially in baseball, and we say, we know it's going to be bad down the line. We know as soon as the ink dries on this contract that it's going to be bad in about 5 years. We get that.
Right.
This is a scenario where I think you can lock him up now, and that contract is going to look really good in about 5 years.
Actually, you could argue the Matthew Stafford contract ultimately did.
Yeah.
Remember when he signed that, when he became the highest paid quarterback in the NFL, and people lost their freaking minds.
Right.
And in 2 years, less than a year, that's just a market rate deal.
The market value on these guys changes so rapidly.
There's 32 teams. There's not 32 quarterbacks out there.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And it looks like the Lions do have a guy who could start for the majority of teams in the league. I just hope it's the Ben Johnson Jared Goff combination really seems to be working out, and there's just so many moving parts here that could change very quick. That could change very bad. Is Goff playing as well as he is because of Ben Johnson? What happens if he gets that head coaching gig he's looking for? Or, that kind of stuff, or or what if he gets injured? And there's so many things that. Quarterback is such a fluid position in the NFL. Yeah. And would you have seen us having this discussion a year and a half ago? Especially after one of those games where Goff threw the ball away on 4th down. But then again, if you think about it, the Lions are trying to find their way back then.
Yeah.
Goff was essentially a wounded duck at that point. I think he wasn't sure where the hell he stood, because he just had a Super Bowl team say, "We don't want you, go away." That would shake anybody up, and I 2 years ago I would have said, Goff's a bridge quarterback, and this is the draft where the Lions go all in on their quarterback of the future. I'm starting to think that might not be the best move right now. I could understand it if they do draft a quarterback, if one falls to them. But it's, as you said, it looks like one's not going to fall to them at this point, at least not one of the top 4. And I don't know. I'm still not 100% in on Goff. I'll just put it that way, just because he has shown stretches where he plays like an all-pro, and he has stretches where he plays like Andre Ware. And I just want to see those Andre Ware stretches not become 6 games, but maybe 1 game, or not half a season. Like this first half season in Detroit, he was awful. Then he played pretty darn well, at the end of his first year here. Same thing last year. But again, there's always the caveats. There was injuries and personnel changes, and they didn't have a running game, and now they're starting to develop one. I think this is where it might come down to. If Jared Goff has a running game, he might be an elite quarterback, because that's when he had his best years, he had Todd Gurley, a healthy young Todd Gurley, before the wheels fell off. Right. Maybe the Lions need to draft that running back out of Texas. Was it Bijan Robinson? Yeah, Bijan Robinson. Yeah. Maybe that's the guy they should be targeting, not a quarterback. And say, here's our next Barry Sanders, Billy Sims. And put him back there with Goff. Goff can do play action to his heart content. Maybe that's the guy they need, And it wouldn't surprise me. I think, I'll put it this way. Free agency starts in a week. I think it starts on the 15th. So 8 days from when we're recording. For 7 days, I don't know. I can lose track of time. I'm sorry. But if the Lions sign a number one cornerback in free agency, then I think all bets are kind of off as to what they might do in the first round when it comes to a quarterback or a running back or something like that. But if they don't get that cornerback, which they desperately need in free agency, I think that's the guy they're taking at 6. That would be my bet. Be it Gonzalez or the other or Witherspoon, the guy out of Illinois.
Yeah.
And this whole conversation could be moot after free agency. We just don't know right now.
Yeah.
This is all speculation on our part.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I agree.
Anyway, let me ask you this. Did you watch any of the NFL Combine?
No.
Neither did I.
The only part of the Combine that interested me was when Eastern Michigan defensive lineman Jose Ramirez did his thing. And I didn't even see that live. I just saw somebody share the video and I watched that. But no, other than that, no.
Yeah. And that's what gets me bummed by the reaction online and on television and on sports talk radio. It's like, really? I don't get the fascination of watching, large men in T-shirts and shorts run routes and do blocking drills. I did all those drills when I was 17 years old. I hated them. I wanted to play in games. So, to me, I think the most interesting stuff that comes out of the Combine are the interviews from the coaches and general managers. Like I know Dan Campbell said, well, I would, we have our eyes on quarterbacks. I wouldn't put it out of the realm of possibility. We might draft one. Is it a smokescreen? I don't know. But, that's the kind of stuff I find interesting. Just the rumors and the interviews of coaches and general managers and that kind of stuff. But when it comes to, so-and-so ran a 4.440, oh my God, like, whatever, and when does that ever made a difference? I think one of the best comments I saw was when Anthony Richardson was tearing it up in all the drills, and he set a record for the vertical jump. And I saw how often does a quarterback have to leap straight up in the air?
Right.
He's athletic, but is he accurate? That's what so. Yeah, I'm with you. I'm not a big fan of the Combine. No, I didn't even. I've run. There's college football games. There was Premier League games. There was. If you want to watch sports, there were so many things to pick from. Hell, I watched a lot of golf. The Arnold Palmer Invitational was quite entertaining. But yeah, that's just another sign, Greg, that this is our national pastime is the NFL, and it's a 365-day-a-year league at this point. So
yeah.
Anyway. I think it's time for a jerk of the week.
Well, I want to know what the New York Jets are doing. The New York Jets, who I've frequently have knocked on this podcast as being the Lions of the AFC for their dysfunction and their inability to win and their inability to. And I know Bob Page, our good friend Bob Page, loves the Jets. That's one of his teams. They and the Giants. And he always throws it up to me. Well, how many Super Bowls have the Lions been in? And I said, well, okay, I'll give you your Jets got into a Super Bowl back in 1968. That's true.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think they got into a conference championship, maybe, I don't know when after that. But other than that, the Jets have been dysfunctional, bad, can't find a quarterback, weird, just a strange franchise.
Yeah.
And now they got goofy uniforms, but now there's reports that they're going after Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah.
Now, Rodgers is going to be 40 in December. Okay.
Yep.
So he's 39 now. He's going to be 39 when the season begins. I don't know what the Jets are doing. I really don't. I don't know what. I mean, I know that they don't have they drafted Mark Sanchez the same year the Lions drafted Stafford.
Yeah.
Sanchez flamed out after about 3 or 4 years and then bounced around the league. Then they tried everybody from Geno Wilson to Ryan Fitzpatrick to Zach Wilson to you name it. They've tried it. And with no success, they drafted Darnold. Darnold was going to be the guy in 2018. Right. That was going to be then. Darnold had that big opening night against the Lions, and he was going to be the next savior. That didn't work out. Now they don't like Wilson, and they want to get rid of him. And so now they're turning to Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah.
And I just don't. I don't know. I don't know what either side is thinking on this one, frankly.
Yeah.
I think the Packers, Al, would just as soon wipe their hands of Rodgers. You know, they haven't won really anything of note with him since they won the Super Bowl some 12 years ago. Other than that, there's been a couple of playoff victories here and there. Yes, it's true. But for the most part, they haven't really done much. Okay. Other than continue to win a very bad division. Okay. That they have done that. Okay. I'll give them that. I think for the problems that he causes, or for the maintenance that the baggage that comes with him, I think the Packers, you mentioned Jordan Love a little earlier. I think the Packers would just as soon. I know what the Packers are thinking. I can see that why the Packers would be interested in this. But why Rodgers would be and why the Jets would be is another story. I know why the Packers are probably licking their chops. They probably would trade him tomorrow if they could, to be honest with you. I think the Packers are ready to move on.
Yeah.
And just like they were ready to move on from Brett Favre, there's always a time when you move on from someone, unless that person retires. Sometimes you have to part ways. They did it with Favre. They should do it with Rodgers. It's still not a very good division, even though if the Lions are picked to win it, I still don't think it's a very good division. And there's really, I don't know that you're really sacrificing a whole lot if you just wash your hands of this guy, let the Jets have him, and you then develop Love or whoever else you want to get, and try to kind of rebuild the team that way. I don't know what benefits that Rodgers brings to the Packers at this point. I really don't. You know, we mentioned that game against the Lions, the last game of the season in Green Bay.
Yeah.
Everything was all set up for them. They had a team that was eliminated from the playoffs. They were playing at home in that cold tundra. They had the incentive of, if we win this game, we're in the playoffs. You could have come up with a better scenario. Yeah. And the Lions beat them. And I don't know what the fascination is anymore by the Packers of having Rodgers on the roster. I really don't. And that's, I know there's been, yes, I'm considering the anti-vax thing, the whole 9 yards. I get it. That's part of it, but it's just taking that out of the equation. Just what's happening on the field thing. Is he still a good quarterback? Of course. Of course. Is he an upgrade from Zach Wilson? Yes. But what I'm saying is, what are the Jets getting here? They're getting a guy who will be 40 by the time the last portion of the season kicks in. Okay. I don't understand what the Jets are doing here. I mean, you're going to have to get a quarterback eventually. Not like they're getting Aaron Rodgers when he's 30. He's going to be 40. Okay, so what are you going to do after Rodgers piddles out after a year or two? What are you going to do? You're basically casting aside Wilson and that other guy they got. I don't even know what his name is. He's not good either. Yeah, Mike White. He's not good either. Yeah. So what are you going to do? Yeah. You still have to fix the quarter. To me, it's kicking the can down the road. It's bringing in a guy, and I know that the Jets are trying to be relevant. The Giants right now are getting all the ink in New York. I understand that. You mentioned Daniel Jones. The Giants are a good team. They're going to be a good team for a while. Yeah. They're getting all the ink in New York, and the Jets are trying to. They thought they had something with Saleh. Yeah. They were 7-4 at one point last year. Lost their last 6 games and looked awful in all 6 games, by the way, just awful. And part of it is because they didn't have a quarterback. Yeah. They didn't have a quarterback. So I don't know what the Jets are doing here. I don't know what they think this is going to do for their franchise. And I don't know what Rodgers is doing. I mean, I don't know. Obviously, he's soured on Green Bay in some way, shape, or form. Why he's talking to the Jets, and maybe that's only because the Jets are the team that's reaching out to him. Maybe that's what it's all about. Yeah. And I guess if you're Rodgers, okay, I'll listen. Sure. I guess. I mean, why not? But this is more about that. This is about Rodgers so much. It's about the Jets. I don't understand what they're doing here. I don't know what the game plan is here. You sink a bunch of money into Rodgers at the expense of what? Expense of the rest of the team, essentially. Yeah. And they're not. The Jets are as bad as White is, as bad as Wilson is. They are not a Aaron Rodgers away from winning anything. That team is, with all due respect, it looks like, I hate to say this, looks like the Lions made the right decision in hiring Campbell over Saleh.
Yeah.
Because Sala is proving to be maybe not some of the bloomers off that rose, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
So the Jets continue to be this, to me, a laughing stock of the AFC. And this is just cementing that.
Yeah, it's funny is that, boy, they went through this once trying it with Brett Favre. Oh, let's try it again with another aging Green Bay quarterback. So, yeah. And it's funny. They'd be moving from one train wreck in Zach Wilson into another style of train wreck.
Right.
And Aaron Rodgers. Can you picture Aaron Rodgers in New York City? Oh, my God. It would be, he would be in the news every day of the week. Yeah. Oh, God. I don't even want to think about that. God, that's a good call. And I don't know what they're doing. Well, my jerk of the week. I've been binging Ted Lasso. I watched all 22 episodes in 2 nights because I wanted to get ready for the new season. And I wanted to nominate Nate Shelley as my jerk of the week for betraying Ted Lasso. But I'm not going to nominate a fictional character as much as I'm enjoying this. Nate the Great, he did some bad things. But I got, well, there's John Morant and his idiocy with pulling out a gun in a strip club,
right.
and then put it on Instagram in video. And now, so he could end up suspended for a very long time by the NFL. Or there's the Texas Tech head basketball coach who used slavery quotes from the Bible, trying to discipline his all-black basketball team. He ended up getting suspended for being an idiot. But I'm going to go with something a little more normal, lighthearted, I'm sure you're aware, Greg, of Antoine Davis, the kid out of Detroit Mercy, who narrowly came up this short of breaking Pistol Pete Maravich's all-time point-scoring record in the NCAA. Right. He ended up, he needed, I believe, 26 points to tie, I think 27 to beat him. He ended up with 23 points in his last game of the season. He got knocked out in the, I think, the quarterfinal round of the Horizon League tournament. But, he still might get a chance to break it if Detroit Mercy ends up in the CBI, was it the CBI tournament? Let's see, it's the CBI, the College Basketball Invitational, which is a pay-for-play postseason tournament. Essentially, if you don't go to the NCAA or the NIT, well, you can pay to get into the CBI. We'll see if they actually do that. But regardless of all that, my jerk of the week are the people who were giving Davis and Detroit Mercy grief for breaking for even approaching this record. Saying it should have an asterisk, or, it shouldn't count because he played 5 years and Maravich only played 3, and Maravich only played in the SEC, and Davis played on a mid-major, Pistol Pete played at LSU, different competition. But, I hate those kind of arguments. The kid did what he scored a hell of a lot of points, played very, very well for Detroit Mercy. And I just find it's a big disappointment he wasn't able to break the record. He still might, as I said. But for anybody to belittle his accomplishment because it was more of an aggregate compared to Pistol Pete averaging 44 points a game, the way he did. And I think Davis ended up averaging like 25 or something like that over his career, something like that. And plus his career got extended because of COVID and everything else that happened. But to belittle a college basketball player's accomplishment because of reasons I just find ridiculous. And there was a lot of people out there saying it shouldn't count or it should have an it's like Roger Maris asterisk, that kind of BS. If he sets the total points record, he sets the total points record. It doesn't make a difference how it happened. And the argument goes both ways. Pistol Pete didn't play against black players for the most part. The SEC was segregated back in his day. There's other arguments to be made that, would Pete Maravich put up the numbers he did if he played in the Big Ten? Where they had black players. He probably would have been great, but he may not have scored 44 a game. So it goes both ways. And my jerk of the week are people who tried to besmirch Antoine Davis and Detroit Mercy for no reason other than he's not Pistol Pete Maravich, and he didn't do it in 3 seasons. So I hate people who try to gatekeep records, if you know what I'm saying. If he scores more points, he scores more points.
Right,
that's my jerk of the week.
Right. That's good. I'm glad you said that. Yeah, not only that, there was also a piece, and I can't remember who wrote it. It was in one of the local papers. Who's basically, he was saying that I guess U of D has a chance. I didn't know this. U of D has a chance to play in some sort of postseason.
Yeah, that's the CBI.
Pay to play tournament.
Yeah, it's a level below the NIT.
Right, and the writer was saying, well, the U of D should not do this, because it would make a mockery of because they would be doing it only so Davis could get
the record. Right.
Which I don't agree with that take either, by the way. I mean, but what you're saying is, and I agree with you, is, everybody wants to take records. You mentioned gatekeeping records. Everybody wants to take records and force feed them as apples to apples comparisons all the time.
Right.
That's not the way records work. It's not the way it works, especially a record like that. Maravich will always go down in history as averaging that many points per game, which was amazing. You mentioned he didn't play against black players, but he also didn't play in the era of the 3-point shot either. And you can make the case that Maravich, had there been a 3-point shot in college when he played, would have had immensely more points than he has now. I don't besmirch this kid Davis one iota. If it's like any other total record. It's like when we had our friend on the show, Travis Bader from Oakland U, who's going to break JJ Redick's all-time record for three-point shots. Okay, fair and square. I mean, you have a total that's more than anybody else. You've got the record. Now, what you're talking about, those people who are besmirching and the asterisk, all that kind of talk, you can do that. That's bar talk. You have that. That's a bar debate, a bar room debate. You can sit there until you have a lot of fun with that. By the way, just debating it. You know, while you played in this era, you mentioned the black thing. He didn't play against black players. Well, then I would say, Maravich didn't play with the 3-point shot. You have a lot of fun with it. Go back and forth. That's fine. That's fine. But just to flat out say that no, timeout. I know it says that he has more points. Right. But really, it's always going to be Pistol Pete. It's a bunch of baloney. Yeah. I remember Roger Maris. You mentioned Maris. Okay, he took flack because Ruth's record was set during a 154 game season, and Maris was playing in a 162 game season. So as it became evident that he could do this, they said, well, geez, you're 154 versus 162, and Maris said, which 154 games? And it was a good point. The bottom line is, you can't apples to apples these records. There's too many variables, different eras, different situations, different social scenarios. There's so many different things. Rules are different. The way the games are officiated, on and on and on. And so it's just accept the fact. Why can't people just accept that this kid's the new, if he would have done it, this kid's the new all-time NCAA points holder, period. And not, it doesn't take anything away from Pete Maravich. And I'm sure if Pete was alive today, he would be the first to congratulate this kid. So I don't get it. I really don't. I'm with you. I agree.
And if anything, Pete Maravich was his life would have turned out a little bit differently than it did as it was. He had an asshole for a father, and he had his own issues and died far, far too young. But I would have, he's one of those guys where I would have loved to have seen Pete Maravich play with today's rules. He scored 50 a game, easy in the NBA. In today's NBA, that guy was just an amazing jump shooter, and from long distance when guys didn't shoot from long distance.
And those passes he used to make.
Yes. Oh, while wearing Converse and socks that were sagging down to his ankles.
Right.
All right. With that, let's get Gary to get the hell out of here, Greg. So why don't you get out any thank yous and tell us where to find them on social media and all that fun stuff.
Sure. Not sure if we'll have a guest. Hopefully, we will have a guest for you next week or next time. We'll see. That's going to be on March 21st. So we'll take a we'll keep you posted on social media about that. Follow me on Twitter at Greg Eno. I'll read my WordPress Out of Bounds blog every Monday. I appreciate that. Last column was about the Red Wings rebuild with Larkin and Yzerman.
Yep.
You can also well, Al will tell you how to find the show, where the mothership is and everything like that. I want to thank my lovely wife Sharon for putting up with this nonsense every 2 weeks, and thank you, Big Al, for making Tuesday night so gosh darn fun.
Yes, indeed, and give a shout out to you, Greg, for just making time out of your busy schedule. I know you're busier than I am, and it gives you an excuse to talk sports for a couple hours, maybe have a cocktail to boot. So, and I missed Bean. We didn't hear Bean at all this week. So
he was sleeping like a little angel the whole time.
A little. I like how you had that, a little angel. That's a little angel. But also a programming note. I'm going to be out of town the first two, like the last week of March, first week of April. So we won't have a podcast on April 4th like we would be scheduled. So we'll have to delay any opening day discussions till later in April. We'll remind you of all that when the time comes. I wanted to get that out there. You want to listen to the show? I've just put it this way. Please like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. Please comment. If you want to find all the links to everything I'm going to talk about here, go to the kneejerks.net, where you'll be able to find the links to anything and anywhere you want to follow the podcast. But if you want to listen to this podcast and subscribe to the podcast, which we would very much appreciate, you can find us in all the usual places: Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Play, Amazon Music, Deezer, Radio Public. As I said, the kneejerks.net is the homepage where we'll have all the show notes and the links to all this fun stuff. As always, if you want to find us, just do a search for the Knee Jerks, Greg Eno and Big Al, the Knee Jerks. Well, some combination of that will allow you to find the podcast, and then please subscribe and download the show. And I think with that, that about covers it. So who knows what we'll have to talk about next time around, because when I put this show together, Greg, I was like, what the hell are we going to talk about for 2 hours? And here we are 2 hours later. So, well, then again, we spent a good hour on the Wings as it was. So thank you, Steve Yzerman. So
yes,
there goes also my thank yous to Steve Yzerman for giving us a lot to talk about this week. So, but until this time, 2 weeks from now, we'll have, we'll have NFL free agency for sure. We'll probably have a little more baseball to talk about. I'll have a better idea what the Tigers roster is going to look like. And whoever else knows what's going to happen. Until then, this is Al Beaton saying good evening, good luck, and aloha.
Ciao, everybody. We'll see you in 2 weeks.